So you quite possibly want the best SUV ever made. It's not a soccer mom vehicle. It's got a removable top, 5-speed manual, 22RE, one of the best engines ever made, even though it's slow and has bad torque. It's an amazing off-roading vehicle, and unlike some other Japanese SUVs from the 80s, this car can still get up to 70 to 75 miles on the highway without being at like 5,000 RPMs. There's also almost no luxuries in this car, so there's barely anything to break. And I mean, you cannot beat the styling. It looks like a brick, and if you know anything about bricks, they're sturdy, just like a 4Runner. In this video, guys, we are going to be talking about the first gen 4Runner 1984 through 1989. First, we're going to go over the years, the trims, the common problems, then we're going to go over all of the rare parts and goodies that make the car more valuable if you see them in the car. And last but not least, we'll talk about the 5 rarest colors in this car. It's crazy how many different engines this car had, and it's crazy how many beautiful color combinations this car had. This is truly an icon from the 80s. And just like Haggerty said, and just like a bunch of other sites said, this car is going to be worth money in the future. So if you've been wanting one, hop on the train right now before it's too late.
4Runner, #1 in customer satisfaction for 2 years running. So who's looking out for #1?
Toyota.
Toyota, who could ask for anything more?
But before we start this video, make sure to like and subscribe, guys, down below. Join the Discord. Please turn on that notification bell if you like this video, and let's get into it. So the first generation 4Runner was from 1984 to 1989. Now you might be saying, it's only 6 years. The current 4Runner has been out for 13, and during those 13 years, they only had one engine in that car. But in those 6 years, there are 5 different engines you could get in this car. And the crazy thing is they're year specific. Usually with cars, you got 5 different engine options and you can get them all throughout the years. Well, this one, if you want a carbureted, you got 1 year. If you want the 3.0, you got 2 years. So depending on what you're looking for, you have a 2-year search window to get that exact engine that you want. So the first year of production was 1984, and that year they had the 22R engine. And this is the only year you can get this carbureted motor. And it made 97 horsepower and 128 foot-pounds of torque. This engine would be great if you want a car that has no electronics in it. If you're the type of guy that worries about an EMP or the shit hitting the fan, this is the perfect vehicle for you. The only problem is if you like to off-road, although it does have the solid front axle, which is very desirable, going up steep inclines makes the carburetor choke, so you would want to get a fuel injected 4Runner if you care more about off-roading on steep inclines. Now we go on to 1985. If you want the rarest version of the 4Runner and probably the best for off-roading, this is the year to get. Not only because it's the first year of fuel injection, but because it also carried over that solid front axle from 1984. Because it became fuel injected, you got a little bit more horsepower too, and the horsepower got bumped up to 114 horsepower and 142 foot-pounds of torque. So if you find one of these for under like 4 or 5K that works, definitely hop on it, even if it's raggedy, because it's definitely worth it. Swapping in a solid front axle is going to cost you about that much money anyway, so just get the 1985. From 1986 to 1987, other than it becoming IFS, also known as independent front suspension, like on the newer 4Runners, the only other thing that changed was you had the option to buy the 22RET, which is the turbo version of the 22RE, and you gained a little bit more horsepower. 22RE made 145 horsepower and 177 foot-pounds of torque. Now you might be thinking, okay, we're almost at 200 foot-pounds of torque. Can we tow? No. Scrap the idea of getting one of these if you're thinking about towing with this. Instead, get a Dodge D250 and call it a day, because these all around, no matter what engine you get, are just bad for towing. And then the last 2 years of production was 1988 and 1989. I have a 1989, but I have the 22RE 5-speed, which is the most desirable engine in tranny combination. But during these years, they also added the 3.0. You might be thinking, okay, 3.0, that's the biggest displacement. This must be the one that's worth the most. No, it's called the 3-point slow for a reason, and it also has some problems, which I will talk about later in the video. But this engine made 150 horsepower and 180 foot-pounds of torque. The only reason why you would need to buy the 3.0 version is if you were thinking about swapping in the 3.4 from like the 3rd gen 4Runners or some of the other Toyota trucks. Then this would be a great investment, especially if it doesn't work, because you're just gonna be taking the 3.0 out anyways and swapping in that 3.4. Now that we got the years out of the way, let's talk about the trims, and it's actually really simple. You have the DLX and then you have the SR5. And there's really no way to know what options you're going to get on the car just from knowing the trim. There was endless possibilities for an SR5. Pretty much SR5 meant at least you had something in the car that was better than base. The DLX is the base model, and that's the model that I have. But since we're talking about the 80s here, everything that is in the SR5 is easily transferable into a DLX. So if you want the double stack center console or you want something else, except for the sunroof, it's very easy just to swap out parts. So for my build, I'm selectively putting in the parts that I want on my 4Runner. So now, if you're going to look at one of these and you want to get a better deal and you want to know if this 4Runner has some rare parts, I'm about to tell you all of the rare parts that will definitely add value or at least cost you a lot of money after buying one if these parts aren't already in the car. First one, and the biggest one I think that everybody wants in their car, is an inclinometer. This tells you the degree of tilt, it tells you how forward you are or back you are, and it tells you your altitude. It's super cool. I mean, the only new car that I can think of that has it is the FJ Cruiser, and that's not even really that new anymore. So everybody wants one of these. So if you see one of these in the car, you know it's an SR5, and that is a pretty good feature to have in a car. And the next one on the list is the double stack center console, especially if you have a little safe in your glove box, if that's being taken up by a firearm and you need a place to store your insurance. Because honestly, if you keep those two things in the same place and you get pulled over, the encounter with the police is just not going to go well. So that's why I like this. You can put your insurance in the bottom of the center console, and you won't have to worry about them thinking you're going to grab your gun. A lot of these things are beat, and especially the leather armrest. At this point, there's almost no leather left. Another thing that is super rare but still might turn you off about the car is a rear seat delete. These 4Runners are meant to have 4 seats, but when they are imported to the USA, they only had 2, and there is a panel on the back that kind of made it look like a truck. Most of these were taken out and replaced with the seats, but some 4Runners still retain this option when they were sold. So it's definitely rare. They do cost around $300 to $400. Not that many people buy them though, because everybody likes more seats. And it really just doesn't improve anything about the car, because you can still fold the rear seats down and have the same amount of bed space as if you were just to get the rear seat delete. Now, something that's even more rare than the rear seat delete is the rear seat delete seat. If you want to know more about this quirky thing, make sure to subscribe, because I'm going to be making a video on that soon, because I'm installing that in my 4Runner. Now for audio, if you see the OEM double din cassette deck with the equalizer, that is big money. Those go for around like $600, and that is a huge score. For comfort options, when this car came out, you had the SR5 seats and the SR5 Sport seats. The SR5 Sport seats are probably one of the most expensive seats to find, because you know they are at the top trim, not that many of them are made, but it has full adjustment, and from what I've heard, they are one of the most comfortable seats you ever can get in a 4Runner. The other really expensive seats are the SR5 monogram seats. These were usually in the earlier models. My buddy David, he has them in his 1985 4Runner, and honestly, if I didn't care about comfort, I would get these, because this screams 80s and they're just super cool. And like I said earlier, one of the biggest things that will add value to the car is it being a 1985, because of the fuel injection and solid front axle. So if you find one of those for a good deal and it's matching like a 1989, a 1986, or any other year, definitely go with a 1985, because that is the unicorn year. And now that we got the parts that will add value to the car when you're checking it out, let's go on to the 5 rarest colors you can get for this car. These colors are just all amazing, not only because of the color itself, but also the decals that come on the car. There's really no other way to put it. They all complement each other really well, and I love that from the dealer you could either get a white hardtop or a black hardtop, so it even gives more contrast to already amazing colors. The first 3 colors that I'm about to list were made for 2 years only, and then the last 2 colors on the list were only made for 1 year, and the last one will be the rarest color of them all. So first off, we have cream, and this was made from 84 to 86. This is a color that you just usually do not see on cars, and it's kind of cool. As you can see from pics, you can get different decals with this car, so I'm not sure if this one is stock, but it does complement the car really well. It almost reminds me of the colors that Toyota is using now, like the sandstorm brown color, or the army green color, or even that pastel blue color that they've been using recently. And this is definitely one of my favorite colors to get for this car. After that, we are going on to medium blue. This was made from 88 to 89. It's kind of that darker, not so bright blue. It complements the car again. It almost, like I said, looks like that blue that they've been using recently. but this is from the 80s, so they're kind of just bringing these like pastel colors back. Definitely on an off-roading vehicle, you don't want that shiny neon green paint they just released. I think it's called electric lime green. I think these pastel colors on an off-roading car complement the build a lot better. After that, we have the 84 to 85 red. And what's really cool about this is not only that you can get the decal on the side, like on this car, this is the early model decal, but you can also get the white top. And this combination looks so good. I love the contrast in the vehicle, but finding one of these is kind of hard just because you either have to get an 84, which is carbureted motor, or you got to get the unicorn year, the 85. Now we're going to go on to the two colors that were only made for 1 year. And I've got to say, the last one on this list is definitely my favorite. So this color right here is the wine red. This is a little bit darker shade of that color they were looking at just before this. And with this darker red color, I definitely think the black top suits a little bit better. But it is a really nice color, and especially with this different decal going down the side with the diagonal gray stripes, it definitely does complement it. And the last color on this list, and the rarest color by far, is the white and bright gold color. This is the only two-tone color you could get, and no, I'm not talking about just the top like in this photo, but I'm actually talking about a two-tone paint scheme, just like say an 88.6. How often do you see a car that looks like a creamsicle? This I think is the only car that you can get a white and like burnt orange color, and I think it is just so unique and different, and that's why this is my favorite color. I don't know why more people back in the day didn't buy this color. It's definitely the best color out of them all, but it was only released in 1985. So this is a unicorn